Hi there, it's Rebecca. Welcome to Throwback Thursday. This is Inner Power Training. I had an experience this week that I'd like to share with you because it reminds me of my throwback past. I was married 3 times, I've told you. My last husband, Michael Cushing, they all passed away the same year, believe it or not, which was kind of sad, but things happen. We don't last forever in this three-dimensional world. And I was reminded of that when I went to this restaurant that I hadn't been to for many, many years outside of Boston the other day to have some lunch. I went in for a late lunch, and this was a restaurant that my brother-in-law, Michael's brother, Bill, used to eat in practically every day. He loved the food there. It was an Italian restaurant, very authentic Italian food, delicious. And so I went in there. I hadn't been there for years. The last time I'd been there was probably when I was with Michael and Bill. And like I say, they both passed away the same year. But the waitress had worked there for many years. So I asked her if she remembered Brother Bill, Bill Cushing. Oh, yes, she said. He was such a nice man. He used to come here all the time. In fact, he always gave us all a gift at Christmas time. I think he would rent a limousine and drive them into Boston and give them some money, as a Christmas gift, which was very, very nice of him and very thoughtful. But it reminded me of how, after we're gone, people remember whether or not we were nice to them or not so nice. And I've lost quite a few friends in the past few years because I'm older and that happens. My parents are both gone, and I lost a brother. I've lost many friends fairly recently. And, it's so important to think about, how do you want to be remembered when you're gone? Do you want people to just say, oh, good riddance? I'm glad that person's out of my life. Or do you want to have them thinking about all the nice things you did and the things they miss about you? You know, our vibration, our energy, whether we uplift people or depress them, is very key to our experiences as far as how we experience life in this three-dimensional world, and probably how we're going to experience our existence when we pass out of this dimension, because we are eternal souls. We were never born and we will never die. And the real authentic self lives mostly in the spiritual dimension. It's our higher self, our soul. And that soul, if we connect with it and we listen to it and listen to the guidance that we're getting, we will have a much more harmonious experience. And when we do pass on, hopefully it will be to an even better place where there really are no problems. I mean, that's what I'm hearing from all these people that have transitioned and come back. There's plenty of people that are having near-death experiences now. I myself had what is called an STE, a spiritually transformative experience, which is kind of similar to a near death, but you don't die. You just connect with your higher self in a way that you see everything differently. I'll just give you some examples of what happened to me when it happened, because maybe they've happened to you. And I love to compare notes with other people about these things because we're all uniquely different. We're all on our own journey, but there are similarities to the things that we experience along the way. Well, when I had my STE, immediately afterwards, everything was brighter, more alive, more lit up in the three-dimensional world. It was like somebody turned on a light switch. I am not kidding you. I walked out of this healer's office where I had my STE as she was talking to me, and the whole world was brighter everywhere I looked. And it was a major shift in consciousness, and all my fear had disappeared. My fear for my body, my life, because I was told I had this terminal condition. And when you get a diagnosis like that, it can be very, very, very depressing. Now, there's different ways you can approach it. I happen to approach it as I am not going to accept this diagnosis or this ultimatum from the doctor that I will be dead. I decided to turn my thought in a different direction because I had proven over and over and over again that what you put your intention on will manifest in your life. I'd done it. I'd already, I was in my mid 20s. I'd already lived in Chicago, New York City in several apartments, San Francisco, and now I was living on Belvedere Island in Marin. And I was still in my mid 20s when I got this bad news and when I had this spiritual awakening. And I had been preparing myself for it because I had been doing a lot of yoga every day. That's one of the things I kind of contribute to the awakening is doing the yoga positions every day. I had a wonderful yoga teacher in San Francisco, Magana Baptiste, in the 70s, early 70s. And I would do my little yoga ritual every morning in my living room. And I would always end it by standing on my head, which would bring back all the dreams that I had all night long. I have to admit, I haven't stood on my head for years, but I would do it back then. And I enjoyed it. I liked being upside down. And there's something to be said for that because it nourishes your brain with more blood, oxygen, gets things circulating in the opposite direction, which is always good, kind of goes against the law of gravity. So I was doing that, and I was really studying a lot of metaphysical books, working on keeping my equanimity and not getting too crazy with the swing of the pendulum, getting high when things were going well and low when things were not going well. I had learned how to observe my thoughts more and be more of an observer. But I hadn't had that big aha moment until I had my spontaneous healing. And I was reminded when I was in this restaurant having the waitress, talk about Brother Bill, who was my brother-in-law, how important it is to do that work on ourselves because we all are going to transition. And he and his brothers came from a very interesting family. Their grandfather was Dr. Harvey Cushing, who was the grandfather of brain surgery and very famous doctor. They still study him in medical school. If I mention his name to a doctor, they know all about what he did. He was the first one to start taking tumors out of brains, very, experimental initially. They named Cushing's disease, Cushing's syndrome after him. He worked on the pituitary gland, and people who have that condition, it's named Cushing's syndrome. Well, after I had my spiritual awakening and after I retired from my flying career, I bought this little book. It's not here right now, but it was all about stories of psychics living in America and healers. And it was a very interesting little book that I bought in one of my favorite bookstores, Be Here Now, which was in Bristol, Rhode Island. And when I was reading that book, there was a story written by a man who was an etheric healer, meaning he would heal the etheric body, which surrounds the physical body and is part of us, because people can become traumatized or out of balance in the etheric, which affects the organs and the material body. And he would just use his hands to heal people without really touching them. And he channeled these doctors while he was doing it. He explained in the book that one of the doctors he channeled was Dr. Livingston. Dr. Livingston, I presume. I think he was the man that went to Africa and worked with people there. And then he said, and there's a new one that's joined me fairly recently. He's an American. His name is Cushing. Well, I could picture from the stories I heard from Michael and his brothers about their grandfather that Dr. Cushing would just keep working from the other side because he worked right up until his passing as a brain surgeon. That was the way he was. He wrote books. He was prolific in what he did. I mean, he worked tremendous hours to do what he did as a surgeon and loved it. That was his life. And he had these children, my husband's father, Henry Cushing, and he had 3 daughters, and he had another son who died in a terrible car accident when he was at Yale University. He was in Newport, Rhode Island one night, and they had a terrible accident. But he had these 3 aunts that were called the Fabulous Cushing sisters. And I never met any of them in person because 2 of them were gone. Babe Paley was one of them, married to Bill Paley. They just did a series on one of those channels about the swans. He was Truman Capote's favorite swan until he wrote a book about all of them and kind of betrayed them. But Babe Paley was very famous, married to Bill Paley. That was their aunt. And then there was Betsy Whitney. I went to her memorial service in New York because she passed after I married Michael. But these people lived very, very interesting lives. They really did. But, the thing you have to understand, people live all kinds of lives. And how do, we show up in these lives, in these bodies, with these parents, in these circumstances, because they say there's a lot to do with us choosing it when we're on the other side, or we need to go through certain experiences to grow and develop more. And that could be the reason. But it doesn't mean that because you're born into what we consider wealthy or elite families that you have an easy path, because I saw it up close. It's not that easy to be always living up to high standards or trying to, be as smart as some of the smart people in your family that you can't even come close to understanding how they do these things, because, that kind of genius is fairly rare. Not everybody figures out how to tap into their higher self, which really does know everything. But you need to know how to access that information to be a genius. We are all born geniuses, but then we get dumbed down by the programming that we get. That's why I was teaching people how to get to that alpha level over and over and over again, and I still do. If you look on my website, you'll see that I have courses that help people figure out how to connect with that higher self, that level of consciousness, which is a different frequency. That's all it is. It's within you, but it's like turning the knob on a radio and changing the frequency. Once you figure out how to do that, you can access it and do some amazing things like change your perception, which will change your environment many times, or the way things are turning out in your environment. You can heal yourself. You can free yourself from anxiety and stress. And that's one of the best things about it. You want to be able to live life more harmoniously by not being fearful. Fear is just the worst. I mean, the few times in my life, and there were a lot of times really, when I had to be fearful of something that I didn't quite understand. But once I began to overcome those fears and put myself in situations where I was forced to face my fears, that was one reason I was a crew member. That was why I started traveling the world. When I first started my flying career, I chose an airline that was only domestic initially. It seemed very much out of my comfort zone to be jetting all over the world when I was 20, 21 years old. But later on, I was very comfortable with it. And I did get to travel the world and check out cultures and people and the way we think on this planet in ways that I never would have imagined. And it's all good. Go to my website, rebeccatripp.com. Check out the books I've written. I love these books. They have all the best information I've gathered for you on how to manifest and how to really transform yourself into the best version you want to become. I wish young people would start to study, the art of creative visualization and how to put your intention on what you desire and how to go within to figure out what your purpose is and what will make you happy in this life, because it'll keep you from having a lot of bad experiences, believe me, if you could just get this training. So if you're a parent, you might want to get these books for your younger friends in your life if you have children. It's a great way to go out and start your life. You know, we go through these 7 year cycles. First 7 years, we live more at the theta level. You can believe anything. Santa Claus is real. The Easter Bunny's real. Whatever your, belief system is, very easy to convince a child that whatever you're teaching as an adult is going to be real to them because they have no filter yet. Then you move into the next 7 years, up to 14, you go more into the alpha level of consciousness. And it's a wonderful time to be a learner. 14 to 21, a lot of peer pressure. Got to be careful about who's influencing you. And you begin to understand whether or not you have a strong inner moral compass or if you're easily swept into every fad that comes along. And then when you get to be 21, that's the next beginning of a next 7 year cycle. That's when you kind of get to pick. Am I going to be a strictly analytical kind of person or more intuitive or a blending of both, which is the best, a whole brain thinker? But you see these people, they go, oh, no, no, I can't believe that. I don't believe in anything out of the box. Those are the left brain thinkers. And then you've got the empaths and the intuitives, and, the autistic ones now are very, very psychic and telepathic. They're probably more right brain thinkers because that's the side of the brain that is in charge of intuition, spiritual sense, connecting to your higher self. And the more you can activate that, because you get a lot of programming for the left brain to be very 3D analytical, but break out of that, break the spell, step out into the higher realms of consciousness, and you'll be able to live life much more divinely.